Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. When we hear about the feeding of the 5,000 from the Gospel of Matthew, it's so easy to just focus on the magic trick aspect of it, right? The sheer supernatural multiplication of bread and fish out of thin air. But what if we look at it from a slightly different angle today? This isn't just the story about a miraculous catering event, it's actually a profound look at our role in God's work. We're going to see why our messy, limited human effort is literally a necessary ingredient for divine action.
Now, to really get this, we first have to talk about a deeply modern anxiety, this intense pressure to constantly earn the affection of others. We all feel it, don't we? That subtle hum of anxiety, this creeping fear that if we don't perform flawlessly, if we don't keep up appearances, we're going to lose the respect or love of the people around us. It is absolutely exhausting. But acknowledging that emotional exhaustion, that deep-seated fear that we just aren't enough, is actually the perfect starting point for understanding why we are called to step up in this biblical story in the first place, and where we even find the strength to do so.
Which brings us to our first section, the certainty of God's love and how it is unconditional and unlosable.
Think about the stark contrast here. On one side, you've got the world's highly conditional love. Our culture is completely obsessed with performance. We're chasing things like looks-maxing, showing off hot fits, racking up impressive career achievements and social media clout, all just to feel like we belong. And man, that kind of love is fragile. You slip up once, and it's gone. But then, on the flip side, we have God's unconditional love. The Apostle Paul talks about this in Romans 8. This love is totally dependable. It is completely unaffected by your failures, your lack of status, or your weaknesses. You don't have to earn it. It's an unlosable, rock-solid foundation that is given freely.
And because of that exact foundation, someone like St. Paul was able to endure things that would honestly crush most of us. We're talking intense, life-threatening persecution, literal shipwrecks, talk about terrible luck, bitter infighting in the early church, and people constantly putting him down and questioning his authority. Knowing about this unconditional love didn't just magically poof his problems away. Actually, scratch that. It did something better. It empowered him to endure them. His foundation was so incredibly secure that when human love and worldly success failed him, he didn't derail. He stayed locked in on his mission.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, the problem of human suffering, and how we tend to deflect the blame.
So, here's a big question. If God's love is so secure, why is there so much suffering in the world? Well, let's be honest. We usually try to wash our hands of the world's mess. We adopt this isolationist mantra. All do me, you do you. I'll live my truth, you live yours. We just put our heads down. It is so easy to point fingers at the government or even blame God while retreating into our own little bubbles. But this mindset actively sabotages our role in God's work. It totally deflects responsibility. The hard truth is, a staggering amount of human suffering comes right back to our own choices, using our freedom selfishly and turning a blind eye to our neighbors.
But hey, the narrative doesn't leave us in a place of guilt or despair here. While we definitely cause some of the problems, we are also uniquely designed to be the solution. A great deal of good is done by us in cooperation with God. We aren't meant to live in detached isolation. We're actually called to get our hands dirty, to actively participate in God's compassion, and take real, tangible care of the world around us. Our actions actually matter.
Let's look at how this plays out in Section 3. You give them food, the shocking command.
Let's set the scene in Matthew's Gospel, because the context is everything here. Jesus and the disciples are out in this desolate place. It's getting late, the sun is setting, and you have this massive crowd, over 5,000 men, plus women and children, and they are hungry and exhausted. Naturally, the disciples start to panic. They're practical, right? They're like, Jesus, dismiss the crowd immediately so they can go buy their own food. Basically saying, hey, this is not our problem. But Jesus flips the script. He says there is no need for them to go away. Give them some food yourselves. Can you imagine the sheer dread washing over the disciples in that moment? Jesus looks at this completely impossible logistical nightmare, and instead of just snapping his fingers to fix it himself, he directly commands his followers to solve it.
And of course, they ask the exact same question you or I would ask. How on earth can we do this with so little? They look at their incredibly meager resources, just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. This perfectly captures that deeply human feeling of hitting our absolute limits. Today, those 5 loaves might be your dwindling bank account, your completely drained emotional bandwidth at the end of a long week, or the tiny sliver of free time you have left. We look at the massive problems around us, we look at our small resources, and we feel utterly, totally inadequate.
But Jesus doesn't shame them for this.
He doesn't scold them for only having a bit of bread. Instead, he extends this thrilling invitation. He essentially says, "Bring to me what you have and watch what I do. Let me blow your mind." He invites them into a profound cooperation. Jesus refuses to just be a solo act here. He insists on being a team player. He wants them to bring their totally insufficient, paltry gifts forward and trust that divine power will multiply them.
Which brings us to Section 4, the value of our labor, and the actual mechanics of this cooperation.
Because, you see, Jesus didn't just conjure this food out of thin air. Think about the hidden chain of human cooperation here. It started way back in the spring, with a farmer sweating in the dirt to grow and harvest wheat. Then, early that morning, a baker woke up before dawn to mill the grain and bake the bread. By the afternoon, the disciples take that exact bread, the physical result of all that human sweat and time, and offer it to Jesus. Finally, in the evening, Jesus blesses it, and the crowd is satisfied. Yes, God provides the miraculous power, absolutely, but he strictly demands our human labor, from the farmer to the baker to the disciples, to enact his miracles. The bread he multiplies is the direct fruit of human labor.
So what does human cooperation actually look like? It's the brave act of offering up what little we have, even when it feels totally insufficient for the problem at hand, and trusting that divine compassion is going to work through our responsibility to care for others. God's compassion doesn't erase your responsibility, it actually calls it forth, relies on it, and amplifies it. We are the literal hands distributing the bread. God's work in the world happens through us, not around us.
And we see the ultimate model for this in Section 5, bringing what we have.
The sources point out a really fascinating connection here. This exact dynamic from the feeding of the 5,000, it's literally the blueprint for the modern Catholic Mass. It's this beautiful, continuous, living cycle. First, the people bring forward the literal fruits of their labor, bread and wine, which represent their time, money, and effort. Second, God takes those inadequate, ordinary, earthly things and mysteriously transforms them. Third, he returns those vastly multiplied gifts back to the people as nourishment. And fourth, this is the kicker, the people are sent out. They are sent back to their actual neighborhoods, to their difficult coworkers, to their struggling family members, to share that love. The logic of the miracle isn't stuck in the past. It's a weekly rhythm of handing over what we have so we can do God's work.
So, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We spend so much of our lives obsessing over our own limits, right? We look at our schedules, our patience, our energy, and we just throw our hands up saying, I only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. I have nothing to give. But the core message here is that God is not limited by your lack of resources. He is only bottlenecked by your refusal to cooperate. God's work in the world is quite literally waiting on your contribution. So stop focusing on how little you think you have and ask yourself, what 5 loaves are you currently withholding that God is just waiting to multiply?